Hey, and on This Week in Pharmacy, one of the most exciting parts of building the Pharmacy Podcast Network is the collaboration, because if it wasn't for the collaboration, you would be listening to a guy that is not clinical. I am not a pharmacist. I'm not even a pharmacy technician. So really unable to dig down into specific issues and themes that are having impact on our pharmacists and having impact on the future of what pharmacists are doing. In 2016, I was lucky enough to meet up with Dom Meff from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He's actually from Greensburg. He's since passed. He's been gone from us for about 3 years now, and his two sons are in the pharmaceutical industry. The Meffs are pretty deep in healthcare, and Dom actually helped in the 80s to set up one of the first PBMs that helped to control U.S. Steel's pharmacy benefit. And Dom reached out to me on LinkedIn in 2015-ish. We connected. He asked me lots of questions about pharmacists and what they were doing. And in 2016, I took a short-term contract with him for about 2 years because he wanted the access to my network. He also wanted to ask specific questions about CPT codes and ICD-9 codes back in the day before ICD-10s came. For billing and tracking, and it was all based on pharmacogenomics. And what he was doing, nothing clinical, he wanted to build an app that he could sell to EHR systems that would quickly identify based on billing if the patient was candidate to get a PGX test based on the medications that they were on. And at the time, the FDA here in the United States had a list of medications that were, I don't know what, I guess they call black box, or something that's really sensitive, or something that has clinical notifications that many people weren't necessarily metabolizing the medication. So he built a business application for physicians that would interface an API into their EHR system to say, hey, is this patient candidate for a pharmacogenomics test from an insurance perspective, and will it be paid for? And he ended up selling that, which was called WellMedRx. And he sold WellMedRx and that technology to UPMC Enterprises right here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. But the exciting thing, once again, about this network in PGX is I attracted some of the top pharmacists in the space of pharmacogenomics. And I've been so excited to work with several of them. And on your screen now, if you're watching us on YouTube, out of New Zealand, who is the queen of pharmacogenomics out of New Zealand, is the one and only Katrina Azer, and I have her with us today on This Week in Pharmacy. Katrina, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Todd, for the lovely introduction. It is great to be here. I'm very excited about this episode, and it's probably a highlight of the end of the year, end of 2024, and I'm really excited to talk about something that I'm really passionate about.
What podcast were you recently on that just came out recently, and it says Navigating the Future of Pharmacy with Katrina Azer?
I featured on a podcast which was released last week with Nima Etiai, and we talked about pharmacogenomics, but also the role of the pharmacist, the fragmentation within pharmacy, how we can grow as a profession, how we should represent ourselves, both personally on social media, and how pharmacists can really be empowered and be in charge of the profession. And something that I focused on in the podcast was how we vent so much on social media, but we don't actually necessarily do it the right way and in a collaborative way that brings us together to work on the same issues, rather than feeling a little bit fragmented or not necessarily collaborating so much. And the tone that we speak and the messaging that we need to get out needs to be united, more united than it is currently.
But I agree. And part of the trust that you've built in the marketplace on an international perspective, that is through the PharmXcel podcast, which I'm so proud that it's part of the network, and it's very uplifting. You give it, sometimes it's advice, sometimes you're talking about pharmacogenomics. You're in this latest episode that you just released earlier in November. It was about mental health chats and beyond. Tell us about your experience, first of all, in podcasting. How has podcasting helped to interlink and connect you with other people?
Well, I have to thank you so much for for being a podcaster, because if it wasn't for you giving me that push, I wouldn't have probably been here. Podcasting has been powerful. It's my way of communicating the issues in pharmacy, the growth I've experienced in my profession, the opportunities that have presented to me. It's just a way of just voicing my concerns about the profession, but also bringing the profession together, uniting, seeing past the fact that we're pharmacists, the human side of being a healthcare professional, and the interplay between that and the practice of pharmacy. Because if, at its core, or at our core, if we can't be humans in healthcare, we can't be effective healthcare professionals. And so podcasting has been really powerful because it has allowed me to bring my authentic self to the table, to empower others, to let them know that there is more to us as pharmacists, that we are capable of so much. And I think podcasting comes naturally to some people. I just feel this urge to voice my opinions, my concerns, to empower others. And that's kind of been the catalyst for why I've initiated a podcast, is just that constant need or passion to get word out there, especially when you have so many pharmacists reaching out to you and say, well, how did you do this? How did you become a pharmacogenomics pharmacist? How did you become a board member? How did you get into writing? So there is need for more pharmacists that are doing great things to get word out there and collaborate in that respect, because I think we have a very limited way of viewing growth, in that if I'm growing, it means I'm taking away from someone else. But I don't think we see that if you allow others to grow together, the whole profession grows. And I'd love to see more of the sentiment in 2025. How can pharmacists really work together to raise their voices, but also collaborate, and let go of sort of those sentiments that, if, I can grow alone, because I think the profession really needs it. And I think we can leverage podcasting in that respect. We can leverage podcasting for that. And you're doing a great job at Pharmacy Podcast Network to bring pharmacists together and to raise their voices, because it's all for the, well-being of the patient, but also the well-being of pharmacists, feeling truly fulfilled about what they're doing as well.
Yep. So I want to make a comment about extending your brand. So the brand of Katrina Azer has been growing over the years. And I want to give a shout out to people that are listening right now. If you have a blog, if you have a podcast, if you post on LinkedIn, maybe Medium, you're writing for Medium or something, you have to mix different types of content in that may talk about the same subject, but it presents you in different places. And something that Katrina does that's absolutely incredible is she spreads herself around in different publications. She was featured on Pharmacy Today, and this is at pharmacytoday.co.nz. And you step back into the world of community pharmacy, and it says in the title, it says, "How my community pharmacy experience set me up for a better pharmacy career." And what's special about this, Katrina, is the fact that you're taking experiences that you've had in other sectors of pharmacy and you're applying them to what you understand and what you're forwarding about pharmacogenomics, but you haven't lost the touch. There's research pharmacists, there's our hospital system pharmacists, and if they want to make a change, if they want to go to a different sector of pharmacy, if they want to become a medical science liaison and work for a pharma company, if they want to go into code development in artificial intelligence and the future of pharmacists, if they don't have a way to promote themselves without it looking like you're trying to promote yourself, but you're showing up on an article, you're showing up on other podcasts, you're a keynote speaker, or you're invited to speak somewhere, or maybe you wrote a preface to a book, you do an excellent job at keeping yourself tied into other sources of content. I want you to share with our listeners like how you manage that with everything else that you have going on, and how you came up with that strategy.
Well, it's a slightly complex question, because I started writing as a hobby. And the more I wrote, the more people were like, I really feel this, this really resonates with what I'm saying. And people found the content really helpful. And this is pretty much how I started scaling myself. It's that through feedback, I knew that what I was doing served me as it fulfilled me, but it also served others. And going back to the human sentiments and the way that humans kind of think and feel, is that we actually feel better about what ourselves when we actually contribute to something bigger than us, through service. And this is exactly how I was feeling. I felt like my content was serving other people, but also serving me because it was making me feel better. And so I was like, well, what if I do more of this? So instead of just limiting myself to, I think it was a platform called Typeshare where I started my blog. You probably can find it if you keep scrolling. If you Google my name and keep scrolling down at the very end, you'll find my very first blogs. And I was like, okay, well, this is really, really cool. People are resonating with what I'm saying. What if I go to Pharmacy Today and say, hey, I'm writing really weird opinion pieces. Do you like them? Sort of thing. And this is exactly what I did. I published it on LinkedIn, came across an editor and reached out to Pharmacy Today. And they're like, this is really good. How about we publish the first article? And then since then, it's been about 2.5 years. I actually write in Pharmacy Today, on their weekly opinion column. And the reason that article that you referenced to came up is probably it has had a lot of reads in the industry internationally and in New Zealand as well. But my strategy really comes down to two things: realizing that growing your career has to be online. It is no longer, and I've said this so many times before, but I just can't help but repeat it, is that it's no longer about a piece of paper. Your CV is no longer about a piece of paper. And not just pharmacists, even pharmacy owners, anyone doing anything in pharmacy, you just need to get out there and talk about it. This is the key to growth. There is a book called Daytime Attention by Gary Vaynerchuk. I'm not sure if you know him, but he talks about attention being key to growth. And right now, all attention is centered on social media. So this is where you have to grow. As an industry, as a business owner, as a pharmacist, whatever it is, you have to get your word out there. So realization is my number one priority, is understanding that I have to do this because this is key to growth. Secondly, it is knowing that it is service. You're offering a service, and by not getting your word out there, your thoughts, your authentic message out there, you're actually doing others a disservice, not just yourself. And thirdly is making time. It's, as you said rightly, it is part of my strategy. Every day I have to sit down for an hour, whether I like it or not. And trust me, there are more times that I really don't want to do it than I do. But you just sit down and you just do, I call it a brain dump. I don't even know what I'm going to write. I don't think about it, but it's surprising that when you actually sit down in your writing space, and I have my own writing space, it will come to you, like, trust me. And that brain dump turns itself, the more you read it, after you've done that brain dump, you just look back at it and you think, oh, okay, so this is where I can add my perspective about retail pharmacy, or this is where my experience and such can fit into that article or that piece of content. But it's like I call it a writing ghost that kind of comes to you once you actually get yourself in that mindset. But I think this is really important, is that just making time to do what matters to you and what matters to me is nurturing that hobby of writing and scaling it. So I'm not sure if people pick this up, but a lot of my content is actually replicated across platforms because it doesn't make sense to just keep inventing new things, especially when you're, short in time. So, I might write a piece of content with one statement out of a podcast, or that piece of content I can grow into another idea in a newsletter. So the content, I would say 50% of it is recycled. And if people also adapt this into their marketing strategy, you don't have to create new content all the time. People think that, if I write on LinkedIn, I'm going to have to write about something new every day. Well, not really. You can just take bits and pieces out of what you've created in the past and replicate that, or grow that specific, piece or that specific idea. So it's actually a lot easier than people think it is. It is just giving yourself the permission to do something new. And this is where we're held back. Pharmacists in general, we're risk averse. We don't want to do things beyond the ordinary, because the way we practice pharmacy means we can't make mistakes. We're not allowed to make mistakes. But the problem, and I've talked about this in a lot of other podcasts, is that manifests into other areas of our lives. So if I was to give any piece of advice to someone, it's like, give yourself permission to make your career growth through marketing yourself online. a priority, especially in 2025.
Absolutely. And what's fun to hear you say this is you are consistent in your message. So being consistent in your message is so powerful. And it doesn't feel, when you first start working out, I just started working out about 9 months ago. I said, hey, it's this time in my life. I'm 52 years old. I need to get back in shape. I started to lift weights again, and I was very frustrated for the first 3 months. Then all of a sudden, it starts becoming addictive, where I'm like looking forward to working out. Now all of a sudden, I'm starting to see I have I want a 6 pack, I only have a 2 pack in my abs, but they're starting to come out, and I've lost weight, and I'm starting to get definition again, and it's seeing what it's going to be like in the future, because I was an athlete back in the day. I swam a lot, so skinny and couldn't even I was on the other end. I was too skinny and I couldn't keep weight on. But the article that you wrote way back in 2022, part of your type share blog, has been saying exactly what we're talking about. You said the power of career visualization, visualizing yourself at a position of where you want to be in your career, how you want to get there, and then planning it. And you and I have just basically kind of said the same thing, but it's kind of like the next phase of that, because you're at a different phase than you were in 2022. But this is not new for you. You've been thinking this way for a while now, and
Forever.
we have the proof because you wrote the
Yeah,
power.
look, this article is probably what, like 2 or 3 years old? I
Yeah.
haven't changed. I'll tell you something. It's like it's magnificent. So beginning of this year, and as a New Year's resolution, my New Year break, I think it was back in January, I read this book called Think and Grow Rich. It's by Napoleon Hill. It's a really old book.
Yeah.
But it talked about this very thing. It's like, write down your goal, and for 10 days, morning and night, just look at that statement and visualize it. And my goal was, by the end of 2024, I want to have trained 50 clinicians in pharmacogenomics. This was in January this year. And believe it or not, 50 clinicians now have been trained. I honestly think it's incredible. The power of just visualizing, and your goal is beyond what I can describe. Like I preach this from the top of buildings. It's like you have to write down. So if you're listening to this, you have a goal, you can't make it happen, just write it down morning and night. This is what you want to achieve by the end of 2025, and you'll just be surprised, because visualizing it just moves it from your subconscious mind to your conscious mind. You then start to become the kind of person who's going to take the type of actions that make that goal happen. And I think if you've also read a book called Atomic Habits, which a lot of people probably have read, it's like, what kind of person do you want to be? You need to visualize that kind of person, and then you'll start to take actions that align with that. And as you said rightly, it's about consistent actions. That 1% every day compounds to 365% by the end of the year.
True.
Do you think about it?
Well, you're making an impact. On the network, Tamara Rugels concentrates on geriatrics, and she's kind of our geriatric lead podcaster. This is one of the people that you reached out to and you've helped. And for me, when I read that my network people are collaborating together, I get chills. Like, I get bubbled up inside, where I'm like, this is the whole reason for the Pharmacy Podcast Network, is to get people on a podcast that people listen to and they're like, I want to know that person. You and Tamara are now international friends, and she wrote such a nice post about you about 4 months ago about working with you, understanding what you kind of brought to the table in collaboration through pharmacogenomics and whatnot. But you're an international pharmacist, and that's special, because just because you're not in the States, and Tamara and me, of course, the majority of our hosts are, two of you, the Pharmacist Diaries host, and Katrina Azer, the PharmXcel Podcast, and Sanjay Patel, and their whole team that helps to build that podcast. Like, it's now expanding to the point that we have other things happening and projects happening. And the reason why we're mentioning this to our listeners right now is, before we started recording, Katrina and I want to continue to do this. So we're going to give a shout out to our listeners, if you have an interest in pharmacogenomics, if you have an interest in your career using this part of our science in the tool bag of our pharmacists, we are modeling and blueprinting and building a online gathering of some of the top minds in pharmacogenomics, and it's still in its build stage, but we're going to give you a hint right now. There's something coming. Katrina is helping me to lead this and kind of put this together, but we want everyone listening, if you have an interest in that specific sector of what it means to be a pharmacist, I want you to reach out to Katrina. Very active on LinkedIn, last name Azer, Katrina Azer. And Katrina, you're so willing to help people. It's just like myself. That's why I've always vibed with you. And I don't have to be your testimony. I just read the testimony of Dr. Tamara Ruggles. So that was pretty cool.
Oh, thank you. Tamara is a great pharmacist. She's so passionate about what she's doing. And, I love working with people who they just know what they want from life. They just want to serve. Service for me is top priority. It's like, because I think, yes, sustainability is important. You need to create a source of income, but I just think that service creates that. It's not, if you put income as a priority, you're not going to get that easily. But if you give so much value out, and this is what my career has taught me, through the podcast, through my newsletter, through sharing on LinkedIn all the time, that's not necessarily what brings revenue. What brings revenue is just providing a ton of value that it's so good that people want to connect and reach out and work with you. And it's the same when it comes to healthcare with our patients, or even, I see a lot of pharmacy owners complaining about, sustainability and community pharmacy and payments and so on. It's like, well, you just need to give a ton of value beyond the product. And this is how you get a ton of value back. And it disheartens me how community pharmacies are not actually leveraging social media to that effect. It's like, well, what advice do you put out on social media, on LinkedIn or Instagram or on Facebook, through your company, through your business, to make people come to you, to see you as a source of truth in a world of misinformation? So that is an area that pharmacy owners are not leveraging as well as they could as well.
You're being recognized by companies too, because Adam Valentine shouted you out during kind of the same time that Tamara did, and it was about the work that you're doing with pharmacogenomics, and Plexus DX made a statement. He's part of their team. He's their chief operating officer. So the reputation that you've built has been because you've done the little steps every day, consistent research, usage. So now people are reaching out to you because they're trusting your motives, they're trusting why you're doing it, how you're getting involved. So talk to us about 2025. What stage setting are we preparing for? Are you preparing for? And what would you like to see happen specifically with pharmacogenomics and the relationship with the rest of our ecosystem out there?
I certainly would like, I see the challenges that the profession is facing right now, especially, as I said, in the retail pharmacy sector, but not only that, in pharmacists in general. And I think the frustration arises from doing the same old thing, the mundaneness in pharmacies that we see so much polypharmacy, so much angst in the profession, so much lack of recognition, so much interdisciplinary rivalry, between doctors and pharmacists, and lack of collaboration. And I think it is really down to pharmacists to own their profession, to learn how to communicate with other providers. A lot of our statements that are released in response to other professions are a little bit, it kind of feels like a children's playground sometimes. I think we really need to find areas that we agree on as a profession with other professions and focus on growing those areas, because fighting back is not necessarily going to get us what we want. But I want to be a voice of empowerment in that respect. It's like, how do we communicate effectively about what we do as pharmacists? How do we bring more of pharmacogenomics to the table? How can more pharmacists be doing that sort of thing? And I think the blanket we're hiding under is that, oh, there is lack of reimbursement. I'm like, you guys are lucky in the United States. There is actually CPT codes. You just need to collaborate with providers to be able to claim for some of the testing. I'm not saying it's also in all states. Some states are more restrictive than others, but at least there is that small window of opportunity. And it's like, how can you leverage that to grow it, to make other healthcare providers or doctors specifically realize there is actually a significant intervention that pharmacogenomics can provide, that there is an opportunity there to enhance patient care. And if, all these pharmacists operating independently through pockets in the United States or even internationally can spread their awareness, spread their surface area, like I said earlier, it becomes part of their strategy that they go out to providers, go out to patients. Patient empowerment is something so important that pharmacists are not leveraging. A lot of us, a lot of them are complaining about lack of reimbursement, but I don't think they realize that it's actually down to the patient and it's a patient choice. If you empower the patient enough with their result, they are then going to be in charge of making the healthcare provider action the results. The problem is that our patients, even myself included sometime early on in my career, we're so disempowered. We treat medicine as paternalistic. We don't feel empowered enough to be able to speak up and tell doctors what we want. We just listen to them. We take in what they want. We're not informed. We don't get ourselves informed and empowered enough to make the right choice for ourselves. And I want more pharmacists to realize that, because if you go out with a new service like pharmacogenomics, you empower your patient enough, that has a lot of power in making the practitioner make the right choice for that patient. And, throughout healthcare systems, we know that the right to be informed is really powerful. Patients have the right to be informed. They have the right to access their information. If we can do enough of that, if we go out, like pharmacists, I talk about pharmacists being medication educators as well. What if pharmacists could go out there in their communities, and I did that early on in my pharmacogenomics journey, and just provide free educational events about medications. Do you realize the power that has in reducing polypharmacy if patients actually know what they're taking and what it is for, and when to recognize signs of over medication or even side effects? How many patients take medications and have side effects that I don't even know are related to medications? So we have such a huge opportunity to get out there and actually preach what we do as pharmacists. If you have to hire a community hall to speak about medications, do it. I did that. But there is so much untapped opportunity in pharmacy right now. We're focusing on the small pockets of reimbursement, and reimbursement is very, very important. But we are in a day and age where we can no longer thrive by just relying on healthcare systems to reimburse us for services. They just don't have it. They don't see the value in it. Our healthcare systems globally are largely reactive. They're not proactive. They don't see the power of pharmacists going out there to actually talk to patients about medications. They're still trapped in, I'm going to give this medication for this ailment, full stop. It doesn't matter what happens before or after that. So we've got to tap into this opportunity, and I want to be a voice for that change through pharmacogenomics, but also just empowering pharmacists in general to see that untapped opportunity in healthcare as well.
All right, so let's talk about I always say low-hanging fruit, and that is the instances where pharmacogenomics makes the absolute best sense for the common medications or NDC codes that are like the biggest culprits. So, for example, I'm showing a old article. It's titled "Pharmacogenetics and Warfarin: Challenges and Opportunities." All right, so this article was 11 years old, but now today we're in a different space where pharmacogenomics is being used more and more and more. But where can we dive in and do podcasts or do papers or do white papers or do blogging where you're saying, hey, in the psychotropic world, when you have a psychiatrist that says, hey, we want you to take, let's say, Zyprexa, and we're going to try it. I love when they say try it. And if it works and we get you on, it might take a while to see if it's working, blah, blah, blah. But with PGX, you could say to the patient, especially with psychotropics, it becomes very delicate with depression. And some people have been taken off medications and then all of a sudden they become suicidal or whatever's happening with their minds. But if you started there and you said, as the psychiatrist, for example, the psychiatrist consults with their pharmacist, the pharmacist consults with the physician. It's kind of like this whole round table of superheroes for the patient. Now the pharmacist steps in and says, hey, let's do a test real quick and make sure that the patient's even going to be using this medication as we intend based on their DNA and their breakup, so that we don't frustrate the patient and put the patient in danger of maybe becoming suicidal, using depression as an example. But what's the sweet spot right now for pharmacogenomics? Like, is there top 3 or top 5 where you're like, this is where this needs to become a stronghold, so at least we have a place to start, show its proof, show it's working, and then move to other things?
I certainly think you hit the nail on the head, because psychotropic medications, antidepressant, has got a lot of evidence to back it up. Some certain psychotropic medications, like SSRIs and certain other medications, they have the most evidence, and some tricyclic antidepressants and so on. They have the most evidence in terms of actionability of the guidelines, the CPEC guidelines, to support use. And I think mental health is generally one of the greatest challenges of healthcare at the moment. It's set to be a huge burden on healthcare system by 2030. I read in an article, not that it is not now, but it's going to get even worse. And you can understand, with the burden of life challenges and just the way healthcare systems are, and people's reaction to events in their life and so on, it is going to get to a point where we're no longer able to fulfill the needs. So if we don't start taking proactive measures now, we can see the repercussions down the line. So this is where the greatest need is, this is where the most evidence is, and this is where pharmacists can really be a catalyst for adoption of pharmacogenomics. And how I tell pharmacists to do this is, like, you've pretty much got to go and knock on doors of providers. I think, like, if you reach out to 5 doctor practices or medical offices in a month, for example, you're likely to have maybe 3 say, no, we don't want to collaborate on that specific project. But 2 of them might say yes. The uptake in general of any new service is about 10 to 20% at most. So if you can get 2 doctor surgeries or 2 doctor practices in your locality collaborating with you on pharmacogenomics, well, imagine what that would do for an entire country if every pharmacist did that in their locality, if you know what I mean. Yep. So there is a huge gap there. There is a huge opportunity, and this is where the most need is. Pharmacogenomics serves patients in different ways. So there are certain medications like ivacaftor for cystic fibrosis where we do have to test before. So there are medications out there that definitely need a test prior to prescribing, reactively to prevent side effects, preemptively in advance. So if you have a patient with a family history of mental health or depression and are likely to need antidepressants, that's an opportunity to test them in advance of need. And then when you need that result, it is there already, rather than telling the patient, well, I'm going to test you now, then it's going to be another 3 weeks before the result arrives. If a patient has depression, they kind of need treatment. Can't tell them to wait for 3 to 4 weeks. And specifically for drugs like, Plavix or clopidogrel, where, if you're going to use it straight away, no one knows when they're going to get a cardiovascular event, right? So having that result in advance is of huge potential. And this is where community pharmacists can have a huge opportunity. And advertising for a service like this, I have a lot of community pharmacists reaching out saying, how do I make this sustainable? It's like, well, you just promote it in your shop. When patients pick up their medications, hey, this is what we're offering. This is the lifetime value to you. And I think we're held back by rejections. Like, well, what if they say no? It's like, so what? If you offer it to 20 patients a day and 5 say yes, well, you've changed the life of 5 patients per day. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So this is where the need is. So there is huge potential. There's huge opportunity. It's just about pharmacists actually taking what I feel is served to them on a plate at the moment. And especially if you're looking for sustainable services, if you're looking at creating sources of income in community pharmacy, or even as a consultant pharmacist, it's a great tool, but it's valuable both to the patient and to the provider in so many ways.
I also want to just ask a specific question. I've noticed, as the non-clinician on the podcast right now, that the panels are expanding. So for pharmacogenetics in the panel of psychotropics, this article that I'm referencing right now just came out in November of 2024. It was just updated. It was originally written in July of 2022. It's ARUP Consult. So ARUP Consult. If you just go to arupconsult.com, you'll actually be able to find it. And this goes through all of these different indicators. Are these called panels, Katrina?
Yes.
Okay. So I've seen an expansion of panels being mentioned. When I used to look at literature way back, remember I said in 2016, we're building an app that would give us a quick hit based on CPT and ICD-9. Now it's ICD-10 codes. Back in the day, it was only 9. But now, are these being connected to specific reimbursement codes so that we know which panel is being tested? And then, as it says here, it says these panels may be used to assess genetic variants that may inform selection and dosing for many prescription medications, including medications relevant to psychiatric, such as, how do you say, psychostimulants, and
Mm-hmm.
ADHD medications, antidepressants. So are these actually from the research that's being done? Are we kicking out new panels that will make changes in dosing levels, the type of compound, the type of medication, knowing how fast someone is metabolizing or how slow they're metabolizing? Talk to us a little about the latest in the expansion of this information.
Look, we've got to be very careful when we talk about expensive panels because some of it is a marketing ploy. There isn't a lot of evidence for some of those expensive panels, but it appeals to some providers, specifically some vitamin companies. You know, some of the expensive panels have sold more to vitamin companies than they have to actually enhancing medication safety and efficacy. So I've always said this when I've collaborated with providers, it's not so much about how expanded the panel is, it's about the evidence behind the drug-gene interactions or behind the gene that's being tested for. And that hasn't progressed hugely. There is still evidence to come for a lot of those panels, but we do have evidence for, some really common drugs or drug-gene interactions in cardiology, such as the warfarin, clopidogrel. There's also metoprolol. We've, and a few other drugs. We do have, huge evidence for TBYD, TPMT, and NUT-T15. We've got evidence for, SSRIs, tricyclic antidepressants, and some psychotropics. They are panels that have been around for, I would say last 5 to 10 years, even beyond that. We're getting more evidence for those panels than necessarily getting evidence for newer panels. Some of the panels that are being tested for, you get really interesting genes like MTHFR and that sort of thing, which is not necessarily usually evidence-based. The only time I would use that as an indicator is if the patient is suffering from a side effect or lack of efficacy that I can see may be related to that gene, but again, that gene may not have a lot of evidence. So it's really important to have a pharmacist in the picture to discern, well, where is the evidence lying for that specific gene? How strong is that evidence? Because when we make clinical recommendations or medication recommendations based on low-key evidence, that's actually going to break the trust in the whole process in pharmacogenomics. So we really need to be focusing, I feel, at this point in time on the panels with the most evidence base if we want pharmacogenomics to gain momentum and to leverage that trust of other providers, because it's not just about us pharmacists. How do we get other providers, specifically doctors who are kind of somewhat skeptical about it? So how can we get them to trust PGX with the evidence that we have? And you also see this reflected in the CPT codes. They don't cover a lot of extended gene panels for a good reason, because the evidence is still not enough to support reimbursement for those specific gene panels. So we've really got to be careful, and I tell this to pharmacists inside the academy, is you have to be careful who you collaborate with. A bigger panel or a more extensive panel is not necessarily a good thing. It's more about actionability of the evidence that is there to support implementation.
That's excellent. I'm glad that you're standing up for it, because if it's used and it's proven and the physicians see the evidence and you're saying the same thing that another pharmacist is saying that's in it, now it doesn't sound like it's just a commercialization or something that's being trying to be sold. It sounds like evidence-based medicine. It sounds like
Yes.
you're using an evidence-based approach to using PGX specific to the condition or the sector of what that medication is in, psychotropic or cardio or whatever it is. Before we wrap up, tell the listeners some of the things that you're going to be doing in 2025. I gave them a little hint that we may be doing a gathering of all of the PGX stars that are out there, and we're definitely going to talk to our network, and we're going to reach out to people that we know on LinkedIn to kind of gather up an understanding if there is interest in this. But talk to our listeners about 2025 for you.
So I'm a fan of setting goals, but being flexible at the same time. So at the beginning of the year, I told you about, me having this goal with the academy, but I didn't restrict myself in that respect. Like, I had a vision, and I hope that by end of 2024, I would have fulfilled that vision. But remaining flexible and looking for opportunities is also key to my growth, like tapping into opportunities, understanding, when people reach out, I don't say yes to everybody, because otherwise I'd be all over the place. It's having, grasping onto the opportunities that align with my vision is really important to me. And so in 2025, I hope to grasp more of those collaborative opportunities. I've already mentioned, I'm working on collaborative opportunities with pharmacists in the USA and hopefully in Canada to expand reach of pharmacogenomics education, creating more, high quality but kind of low cost form of education, and giving a ton of free value to pharmacists to expand my surface area, but also to create more awareness of pharmacogenomics and its potential, and enhancing patient care and enhancing pharmacist careers as well. So definitely, look out for that. Look out for more accessible, easily accessible education. And that's not going to cost the earth, hopefully, but also, like you said earlier, and it's good that we put this out there at this point, because we now need to deliver on it.
Yeah.
I am hopefully looking at creating an event that kind of brings together pharmacists under the PGX umbrella, but also creates a lot of awareness about pharmacogenomics and its potential in patient care. Hopefully a kind of semi-clinical event that just gets everybody in the industry on board to create awareness and create a lot of momentum in the PGX industry, but also for pharmacists, because I truly feel that this is an area that pharmacists can leverage to enhance their careers, but also to have a huge contribution in patient care. And I feel that pharmacists need to be empowered and to just really understand what pharmacogenomics is about. And obviously just do what I've always done, which is being authentic, putting out, my thoughts on LinkedIn and social media and articles and so on, just to empower the profession to optimize medications and really enhance patient care, because we're the medication experts. And I truly believe that we have so much value to offer to healthcare. It's just we need to tap into our inner strength a lot more than we do, and just not get carried away by healthcare systems driving us, because that's largely what they do. We seem to lose our purpose at Medical, because it's too hard. It's a really challenging environment. But if we don't go back to the core of who we are as pharmacists and what our sole purpose is, we're always going to feel disheartened. We're going to feel frustrated with healthcare. We're expecting too much from healthcare when it just can't deliver more than what it already is. And I just want to be a voice for that change, like I've always been. So yeah.
Where should people that are listening, that are like, I'd really like to connect with Katrina, what's your favorite source of social media?
I'm everywhere. No, you can find me anywhere. No, I guess you could just go to LinkedIn, type in my name, Katrina Azer. I've also got my website, katrinaazer.com. But yeah, even if you just Google my name, it will come up with at least 2 to 3 ways where you can connect with me. I'm sure you're going to put a link to my profile, hopefully in the show notes as well, if you'd like to. But yeah, just reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's probably where I'm most present. I'm really responsive to my messages. I try to be. Sometimes it's really hard, but just do reach out to me. I also got a blog, PharmXcel Podcast. It is on Pharmacy Podcast Network, and I'm really grateful for PPN support in that respect to expand my voice throughout the globe. It has been instrumental in me empowering other pharmacists and just getting word out there of what we can contribute as a profession. So yeah, reach out to me on any of those channels.
If you're listening, if you're driving in your car, don't worry about it. When you get back, go to any of the podcast players. You'll notice that Katrina, inside the show notes, is Katrina's LinkedIn. It's also her podcast link. We have many that you can get from, but I'm linking the Spotify version. Obviously, Katrina's on Apple as well. Katrina, this has been special for us in staging 2025. You're definitely a big part of the Pharmacy Podcast Network. You're one of our international stars, so it's very important that you're part of this. Shout out to all of the listeners. If you're interested in being part of something that we're bubbling up, we don't even know what it's called yet, but we're going to put together experts in pharmacogenomics, interest in pharmacogenomics, pay attention to the network, subscribe to the shows, reach out to Katrina, ask lots of questions. Katrina, thank you so much for doing this. Promise me that you'll be back on TWIRx more than just 1 or 2 times a year. We have to have you come back, and we'll bring people in let's dig down into a specific disease state and get someone that's really like tied into it. Maybe we could get a psychiatrist that you know, or a physician in mental health, and maybe we could dig down into some data around psychotropics, for example.
Yep, certainly happy to. I've got a lot to talk about. Everybody who's listening to me probably, or knows me, knows that I don't run out of things to say, but certainly happy to tap into certain areas in pharmacy practice and clinical pharmacy as well. And, if the audience listening have anything specific that they'd like us to talk about, I'm sure they can reach out to me or to you and let us know what they would like to hear from me. I'm quite happy to talk about a wide range of topics. I talk about pharmacogenomics a lot, but I do, talk about careers and just career growth and just mindset and everything like that. So, and this is what I love about creating content, is I don't like to be restricted, because there is more dimensions to a pharmacist than just being someone who deals with medications and drugs all the time. We have that human aspect, which I like to tap into a lot as well. So do feel free to reach out to us and let us know what you'd like us to talk about as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for listening to This Week in Pharmacy. My guest today was Katrina Azer from New Zealand, one of the leading pharmacists in the world, focused on pharmacogenomics, ready to collaborate. If you're a company that's listening to this show right now and you'd like to work with Katrina, please reach out to her on LinkedIn. Reach out to us as the Pharmacy Podcast Network. We'll get you in touch with her. Actually, we're planning to do some collaborations with some companies that are in pharmacogenomics as well. Katrina, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Todd. It was great to be here. Looking forward to the next one. And everybody on the show, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and Happy Thanksgiving as well. Yeah. Maybe a bit late by the time you listen to this, but hey, thank you so much, Todd. See you next time.
See you next time.
This episode is sponsored by Independent Pharmacy Cooperative, widely known as IPC. Established in 1983, IPC is the nation's largest group purchasing organization owned by independent pharmacy. With a mission of maximizing the success of community pharmacists, IPC works to provide members with access to effective programs and services designed to enhance profitability for independent pharmacy. Read more about our mission by checking out our website at ipcrx.com. That's ipcrx.com.